David Tran was never the son his parents prayed for. In the small, two-bedroom house tucked away in a quiet Vietnamese neighborhood in Houston, his parents had a simple dream, a very American dream, shaped by immigrant sacrifice. They worked 7 days a week at their nail salon, scrubbing hands they'd never shake, polishing toes they'd never meet again. Also, David and his sister could climb higher: doctor, engineer, lawyer. Anything that would buy them respect in a world where their thick accents could not. But David? David was born sideways into that dream. He wasn't the smart one, not the obedient one, certainly not the golden child. He liked strange things, old things, watches that didn't tick, rusty coins nobody cared about, paintings with cracks running down the canvas like veins. At first, his parents thought it was just a phase, a silly hobby, until he dropped out of college. It was supposed to be a business degree. Safe, practical, respectable. Instead, he came home one day, his backpack already packed, and told them he was leaving for New Orleans. To do what? His mother had whispered, like the words might burn her tongue. To work. Work. Work like a man with no future plans. No title. No office. No suit. He might as well have said, "I'm leaving to disappoint you for the rest of your life." There was no shouting. Immigrant families sometimes love each other with silence sharper than words. His father turned off the TV. His mother folded laundry that didn't need folding. By morning, his number was deleted from the family group chat. The family photos on the wall quietly rearranged themselves as if to forget there was ever a missing son. Houston disappeared behind him like a closed door. New Orleans welcomed him like an old, tired streetlight flickering at midnight. It didn't care where he came from or who he was supposed to be. The first job he could get was washing dishes at a seafood restaurant near the French Quarter. Cracked plates, greasy water, the heavy, constant clatter of lives being lived in the dining room, lives that didn't belong to him. Rent was a shoebox apartment with peeling paint. Dinner was whatever was left over in the kitchen after the last customer stumbled home. He worked in silence, head down, hands raw from soap and bleach. But there was a strange kind of freedom in that, too. No one here cared about his GPA. No one asked why he wasn't a doctor yet. Here, he was invisible. And somehow, that felt honest. Months later, he picked up another job, part-time work hauling boxes at a small auction house on Magazine Street. At first, he thought it was just another paycheck, until he noticed the things people were selling. Pocket watches older than America itself. Silver rings carved by hands long buried. Portraits of families nobody remembered. Furniture that outlived its owners. Broken things. Forgotten things. Beautiful things. He asked questions. Stupid ones, probably. But the old man who ran the place, a grumpy Italian named Mr. Bellini, didn't chase him off. Instead, the old man started teaching him. About metals. About patina. About the quiet language objects spoke if you learned how to listen. David never told his parents any of this. He imagined them sometimes, sitting down to family dinners without him, telling neighbors half-truths about where their son had gone. He's working somewhere, maybe his mother would say. Maybe that was easier than saying, he's scrubbing gum off tables in New Orleans. But nights in the city had their own kind of grace. He'd walk home after long shifts, past iron balconies laced with vines, past jazz music leaking from bars like ghosts, past the river that didn't care what anyone had lost. He thought about the word failure a lot. His parents probably thought he wore it like a name tag. But failure didn't feel like this. Failure didn't feel like falling in love with old books at the corner thrift shop. It didn't feel like saving up for tools to polish tarnished silver. Failure didn't smell like beignet at midnight or sound like strangers singing on the street just because they could. Failure, real failure, was never trying at all. In Houston, he was the lost son. In New Orleans, he was just a man starting over. And sometimes, starting over is the bravest thing a person can do. David never planned to become anything extraordinary. He didn't arrive in America with grand dreams or golden connections. He came the way many do, empty-handed, but not empty-hearted. At first, he worked odd jobs in New Orleans, washing dishes in the French Quarter, bussing tables, fixing whatever the old landlords needed fixed in exchange for cash under the table. But fate has a strange way of finding those who listen closely. It happened on a rainy afternoon, in a little antique shop tucked away on Royal Street. David had ducked in to escape the storm. The shop smelled of old leather and wood polish. The kind of place that felt like time itself had slowed down. Behind the counter stood an elderly man with silver hair slicked back, polishing a broken pocket watch with the tenderness of a surgeon. His name was Vittorio, an Italian watchmaker, third-generation craftsman from Florence. And without knowing it, David's life had just changed forever. Vittorio didn't believe in compliments. He believed in discipline. Hands before words, he used to say. Your hands tell me who you are long before your mouth does. For 3 years, David worked in silence. He swept the floor, cleaned tools, polished old brass fixtures. Only after months of showing up without fail did Vittorio allow him to touch a real piece. An old silver ring, bent out of shape. You want to work with time, Vittorio told him. First you learn to respect patience. And so David learned. Slowly, painfully. He learned to mend cracked enamel without leaving a trace. He learned to carve initials into silver so small they could fit on the head of a pin. He learned the weight of old gold, the smell of tarnished copper, the delicate heartbeat of a mechanical watch ticking back to life. Years passed like this, invisible years. No applause, no recognition, just the quiet accumulation of skill that no one could take away. But real craftsmanship does not go unnoticed forever. By his late 20s, David had begun to attract attention, not from the loud, flashy rich, but from the quiet collectors, the old money families, the discreet art dealers, the kind of people who valued what couldn't be faked. They brought him broken heirlooms, a sapphire brooch from a grandmother's wedding day, a cigarette case from the 1920s with a hidden engraving, a rare Patek Philippe that hadn't ticked in decades. David didn't just fix objects. He resurrected stories. Eventually, demand grew beyond what one man could handle. So, without fanfare, he opened a small studio, by appointment only. No sign outside. No advertising. Just a word-of-mouth reputation that whispered through the upper circles of collectors and connoisseurs. And quietly, almost imperceptibly, David shifted from being a repairman to being a gatekeeper of authenticity. In the luxury world, authenticity is everything. Anyone can buy gold. Anyone can flaunt diamonds. But to know the difference between a mass-produced piece and a handcrafted original from 1890, that's where trust becomes currency. David's studio became known not just for restoration, but for verification. He developed a discreet service for high-net-worth clients needing to authenticate rare jewelry before private sales or auctions. His clients didn't want publicity. They wanted certainty. A Russian heiress with a questionable emerald necklace. A Hollywood producer obsessed with antique cufflinks. A Saudi businessman looking to verify a diamond tiara rumored to have belonged to European royalty. David worked behind closed doors, beneath antique lamps, his hands steady, his tools exact. He never posted his work online. He never bragged. His work spoke for itself, worn around necks, slipped onto fingers, passed quietly from generation to generation. Years later, people would ask him, "How did you build such a business? How did you earn their trust? How did you get into that world?" And David would just smile, because there was no secret, no viral moment, no overnight success, just years of quiet labor, quiet mistakes, quiet mastery. It was never about becoming rich. It was about becoming irreplaceable. Years passed like a quiet river, winding through the corners of David's life. There were no headlines about him, no social media pages flaunting his every move, no loud victories. Just a man quietly building something that mattered. By the time David was in his mid-30s, the boy who once washed dishes in New Orleans had become a man with rare skills few even knew existed. His reputation in the world of antique jewelry restoration and authentication had quietly grown. Word of mouth, discreet referrals, a whispered name passed between collectors and dealers who valued trust over fame. But even with that success, David never stopped working like a man who still had rent to pay. He was never interested in the spotlight. What he cared about was craft, about doing things the right way, the old way, the patient way. It was through one of his longtime clients, a private art collector from Napa Valley, that an idea first began to take shape. Over dinner one evening, the man told David, "You know, people don't just collect things they love. They want to dine where they feel understood. There's room in this world for a restaurant that speaks the same quiet language of quality and history that you do." It stayed with him. Months turned into years, and that seed of an idea began to take root. Eventually, David met Ethan, a seasoned restaurateur known for creating intimate, timeless dining spaces in Northern California. Where David brought precision, history, and craftsmanship, Ethan brought hospitality, vision, and an understanding of how to create atmosphere. Together, they spent 3 years building Cypress and Gold. They didn't want it to feel trendy. They didn't care about Instagram moments or celebrity chef gimmicks. They wanted the space to feel like stepping back in time, into an era of quiet luxury and southern grace. Nestled along the coast of Carmel by the sea, Cypress and Gold became their first location. A fine dining restaurant inspired by the classic charm of the American South. Polished wood, brass accents, vintage glassware, handwritten menus on thick ivory cardstock. Nothing rushed. Nothing loud. David designed the custom silverware himself, forged in a small workshop in Louisiana. The chandeliers were restored antiques from an old estate in Savannah. Even the music was carefully curated, a blend of jazz, blues, and southern folk that filled the space like warm conversation. But what truly set Cypress and Gold apart wasn't just its look, it was its people. Their clientele came not for noise, but for sanctuary. They were art collectors, vineyard owners, reclusive authors, CEOs who didn't want their faces in magazines. People who valued privacy, restraint, and the quiet elegance of things well made. Reservations were hard to come by, not because of hype, but because the restaurant simply refused to expand beyond its intimate capacity. A table wasn't just a seat. It was an invitation into another world. Within 5 years, Cypress and Gold expanded, carefully, to 2 more locations, one in Napa Valley, another tucked away in Montecito. David stayed behind the scenes. He still spent most of his days in his workshop, restoring jewelry, authenticating heirlooms, working with auction houses and private families who trusted him with their most delicate treasures. Sometimes, he would walk the dining room of Cypress and Gold at closing time, tracing his fingers over the woodwork, checking the polish on the silver. He liked it best when it was empty, quiet. Still, success had come, but not in the way his family back in Houston would have measured it. There were no grand houses with flashing lights, no flashy cars parked in his driveway, no interviews or magazine covers. David had built something different, a life that fit him like a well-worn leather glove. To the world, he was just another man living quietly on the California coast. But to those who dined at Cypress and Gold, to those who held a restored family heirloom in their hands and whispered, "Thank you," to those rare few who knew him well, David had become something far rarer than famous. He had become trusted. And in a world obsessed with being seen, perhaps that was the most extraordinary success of all. Years later, long after I'd traded greasy kitchen shifts for board meetings and tasting menus, the past came strolling through the front door, dressed in floral vacation shirts and loud Vietnamese laughter. It happened on a quiet Thursday evening at Cypress and Gold, our flagship fine dining restaurant in Napa Valley. The kind of place where the sommelier knows your birthday, the waitstaff remembers how you like your oysters, and the marble floors reflect more generational wealth than I ever thought I'd see in my life. I was in the back office reviewing our upcoming private events, silent auctions, wine pairings, charity galas for the old money crowd, when my general manager, Thomas, knocked on the door. David, you might want to see this," he said, his tone somewhere between amused and slightly terrified. I stepped out, and there they were, my parents, and about 10 of their Vietnamese friends, the successful in America crowd, the doctors, real estate moguls, retired nail salon owners turned property investors, the uncles with gold Rolexes too big for their wrists, the aunties with LV bags bought on the latest Vegas trip, all of them standing there like kids in Disneyland, marveling at the chandeliers and whispering about the wine cellar. "Wow, so fancy." My mother's voice cut straight through me. She was wearing the pearl necklace I sent her years ago for her birthday, the one she told me was too plain for Vietnamese weddings. My father? Oh, he looked exactly the same, still walking like he owned every room, still glancing around for people to impress. Apparently, their little vacation group had heard about Cypress and Gold from Vietnamese friends in Orange County. Word on the street was this place was impossible to book, outrageously expensive, and where rich Americans eat. Which, of course, made it the ultimate status symbol for any visiting Vietnamese parent. But they didn't know. They didn't know whose name was quietly embossed on every leather menu. They didn't know who designed the gold-etched logo they were taking selfies next to. They didn't know the kid who used to scrub dishes until 2 a.m. at a grimy New Orleans diner now owned this entire place. God, life has a wicked sense of humor. Thomas leaned over, whispering, "Do you want me to comp their meal?" I almost laughed out loud. "No," I said. "Let them have the full experience." I stood there for a moment, watching them take pictures in front of the wine wall like tourists at a museum. It was surreal. Years ago, they told me I was wasting my life. American kids go to college. American kids work office jobs, not wash dishes. They thought I was embarrassing. A cautionary tale for their friends' children. They told people I worked in food service, like it was some dirty secret. And yet here they were, proudly dining at the empire I quietly built while they weren't looking. That night, I watched from the mezzanine as they settled into the best table, the one usually reserved for VIP members. They didn't recognize me. Why would they? In their eyes, I was still probably somewhere out there, working hard, in some back kitchen they didn't care to ask about. I instructed the staff to treat them like royalty, not because they were my parents, but because that's what Cypress and Gold promised to anyone who walked through its doors. And they ate. Oh, they feasted. Oysters flown in from Maine. Dry-aged Wagyu, so tender my father actually closed his eyes. Caviar service that made the aunties giggle like schoolgirls. They ordered wine I knew they didn't understand, but the price tag made it taste better. At one point, I overheard my mother whisper, "I heard the owner of this place is Vietnamese." My father chuckled. If a Vietnamese person made it this far, that's impressive. I almost wanted to walk down there, pull out a chair, and say, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. It's me." But I didn't. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because this was enough. They didn't need to know. Let them have their night. Let them marvel at the success of some unknown Vietnamese owner. Let them take photos to send to their friends back home with captions like, "Dinner at Cypress and Gold. So fancy." I smiled to myself. Success tastes different when it's quiet. When it doesn't need to announce itself at family parties or brag in group chats. When it sits upstairs, sipping tea, watching everything you've built speak for itself. When they finished dinner, I made sure their bill was paid, not comped, but paid, by the profits from 100 other tables just like theirs. As they left, I stayed in the shadows. Because sometimes, the best kind of victory isn't loud. Sometimes, it's the private kind. The kind that lets you sleep easy. The kind that makes you smile when no one's looking. And God, wasn't that the most beautiful twist of all? I didn't build Cypress and Gold so that my parents could be proud of me. I didn't build it to prove anything to them either. To be honest, I let go of that hope a long time ago. Because at some point, I realized, the most beautiful kind of success isn't something you show off to the world. It's something people quietly enjoy, without ever needing to know who built it. That's why I built Cypress and Gold. A place where my parents could sit down, in a space they once thought was only for the rich, and for just a moment, feel like, maybe, life turned out okay after all. Maybe, we deserve a place like this too. Without ever knowing that the son they used to think was the most useless in the family was the one who built it all. No name on the wall. No introduction. No credit at the end. People like me, kids who grew up in immigrant neighborhoods, waiting tables, washing dishes, carrying sacks of rice, folding napkins, we spent our youth hoping for one thing. To one day hear our parents say, "Well, not bad, kid." But then I realized, parents like mine, from their generation, they don't really know how to say we're proud of you. And maybe, they never will. So I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. Because I learned something. The most beautiful things in this life are often the ones no one sees. The things that don't need to be acknowledged, don't need to be credited, don't need a name attached. They just need to be created out of love, out of memory, out of silent effort from someone standing quietly behind the curtain. Quiet love, invisible success. It shows up in a plate of food, so beautiful people have to take a picture. In a glass of wine emptied between old friends' laughter. In a family dinner, under soft golden lights. Inside a restaurant my parents once thought belonged to someone else's world. Never knowing. It was the world I spent my whole youth building for them. And that's enough for me. I don't need to be known. I don't need to be recognized. I don't need my parents to sit there and suddenly go, "Oh my God, our son owns this place." I don't need that. I just want them to enjoy it. I just want them to feel proud of themselves, of their journey, of their life. Even if they never know that the son they once doubted quietly built an entire world behind them. That's cypress and gold. It's not a monument to my success. It's a love letter I wrote to life. Through food, through space, through quiet kindness. And that's more than enough. Because maybe the most beautiful kind of success is the kind nobody even knows about. They're too busy enjoying it.